A Mother's Day Murder by Dee Ernst. Chapter 8. My mother's assisted living facility nestled at the foot of a gently rolling hillside in Sussex County. It was an old mansion that had been carefully converted, added onto, improved, and improved again until it met all the state safety standards. It still managed to look like a very rich person's gracious country estate. Mom had a room on the second floor. Large and sunny, she had a narrow bed, all her books and pictures, her phone chair, and a small television. In the bay window was her dresser and another chair, and that's where I sat every Friday before going down to have lunch. We had once been able to go out for lunch, but last year she went to the ladies' room at a local Panera, wandered past where we had been sitting, out the door, and was found 3 hours later, sitting in the middle of the freezer aisle of a Pathmark almost a mile away. Now, we had lunch in the common dining room, which was not a bad thing. Aside from the excellent food, the other residents were more or less delightful characters who put on a never-ending floor show for their guests. We sat at the table next to the nimble-fingered Justine Caldwell, who barely had the strength to hold her fork. My mother kept glaring at the poor woman who, since she was fairly deaf, just smiled and nodded. After lunch, we walked around the grounds for about a half an hour before going back inside and upstairs. My mother became agitated, as she often did when she sensed my visit coming to a close. "Justine is taking all my Agatha Christie's," she muttered. "Mom, how is she even getting up the stairs?" I asked. My mother sat in her phone chair, rocking back and forth. She was still a lovely woman, her thick hair almost completely gray, her big, dark eyes angry and confused. I had inherited her creamy skin and thick, perfectly shaped eyebrows, for which I will be eternally grateful, as well as her stubby fingers and love of eating, for which I was not so grateful. Now I could feel her irritation growing. Sometimes I just kissed her goodbye and she'd smile happily. Lately, though, our partings were getting harder. And I don't know why I just can't live with you. I know Mark wouldn't mind. Mom, you need to be with somebody all the time now. You know that. I can't watch you. I have to work. You work from home, she whined. Yes, until I'm off at a conference or a festival or meeting with a client somewhere, I said. My arguments didn't matter to her. She'd heard them all before. She just didn't remember them. This is a terrible place. They do bad things here. No, Mom, they don't. You love it here. And the food is awful. Gruel. I sighed and picked up my purse. One of the aides, Liz, poked her head in. "Leona," she called loudly, "we're getting ready for cards downstairs. You want to come with me?" My mother's head snapped around. Yes, I love cards. She waved in my direction as she got up. "See you tomorrow, Ellie. Give your babies a kiss for me." I smiled gratefully at Liz, who took my mother's arm and led her out of the room. I sat there for a few minutes more. My high school graduation picture was on one of her shelves. I looked at it closely. I was a very pretty girl back then, pretty enough to have lots of young men offer me beer and pot and sex. In the spirit of the 70s, which was when I had come of age, I took many of them up on their offers. That was then. This is now. I closed the door behind me when I left my mother's room. Sam Canali called while I was walking down to get Tessa at the bus stop. "How are you?" he asked, like he actually meant it. "I'm fine. What have you found out?" "I'm fine too, thanks for asking," he said, laughter in his voice. "I realize it's short notice, but can I take you out for dinner this evening?" Kate is working, and on a Friday night on such short notice, getting a sitter for Tessa might be tough. I tried to remember what was in my freezer besides Smart One's frozen meals, sugar-free ice pops, and Kate's chicken pot pies. "How do you feel about spaghetti and meatballs?" "Two of my favorite things." "I have homemade sauce, and I'll get some salad. About 7?" "I'll bring wine and dessert," he said, and hung up. Damn, dessert. Tess and I made a quick run through Stop and Shop and only spent $147. That little girl grabbed everything her arms could reach. When we got home, I pulled the sauce and meatballs out of the freezer, put away everything but the salad fixings and a box of pasta, and quickly dusted the dining room. The girls and I ate in the kitchen, and the weekly housekeeping routine tended to be a little lax. Kate came down, dressed for work, halfway through the process. "You're dusting? Are we expecting the Queen?" "No, Sam Canali." "Do you like him? Do you like Kyle Lieberman?" "Fair enough," she said, and left without further comment. The sauce was still frozen when I threw it in the pot, but by 10 to 7, it was bubbling gently and the house smelled amazing. It had been my mother's recipe, and every time I made it, I remembered Sunday dinners when my father was alive, and he and my mother were still in love after 30 years. "Why are we having the policeman over to dinner?" Tessa finally got around to asking. "And why did you change? Is this a date?" "No," I lied. I did not want Tessa to start getting attached to anyone, or think that I was. "But after we eat, you are going to excuse yourself from the table and go upstairs and watch TV up in the spare room. We may be discussing grown-up things." "Like that dead Mr. Mitchell?" I nodded. "Maybe." "Is there a mad killer on the loose in Mount Abrams?" I shook my head. "No, there is not. And if there was, we have the world's most protective dog to scare anyone away, right?" She nodded. "Can I bring popcorn?" "Yes." "And Oreos?" "No, just popcorn. And if you don't behave, I'll return the Oreos and all the other junk you bought today, understand?" She nodded. The doorbell rang exactly at 7. I hurried to answer, opening the door to find Maggie and Viv standing there, looking excited and each holding a bottle of wine. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying not to look disappointed. "Don't you want to hear what we found out today about Lacey Mitchell?" Maggie asks. Before I could answer, I saw Sam Canali step up on the porch behind them. He had a bottle of wine in one hand and what looked to be a bakery box in the other. "I'd love to," he said. Viv turned around and immediately got it. "Come on, Maggie. We'll come back another time." Maggie, however, missed all the clues. "Detective Canali, what luck! We found out some very interesting things today. They might help your case." My shoulders slumped as Viv poked Maggie with her elbow. "No, Maggie. Let's take our wine to Shelley's house. We'll talk to Ellie later." "Please, ladies, don't let me run you off," Sam said, his eyes dancing. "I find all this amateur sleuthing very entertaining. Unless, Ellie, dinner is ready right this minute?" He was something else. "No, I haven't even put the pasta on," I said. "But it's a beautiful night. Let's stay out here on the porch. I'll get glasses and a corkscrew." "Here," Sam said, openly grinning now. I recognized the box. Pirelli's Bakery. I knew Pirelli's. They made things filled with sugar and cream and candied fruits. I was doomed. They were all laughing quite companionably when I got back on the porch, holding a tray of glasses and a bowl of pita chips. Sam was enjoying himself very much. Viv rolled her eyes apologetically and grabbed the corkscrew, opening her bottle of wine. She poured, and we all drank. I introduced Sam and Viv, but they already seemed like fast friends. The evening was starting to cool off, but the air smelled fresh and clean, with the faint scent of lilacs, and it was still light. I looked towards the lake, and of course, the Mitchell house. There was still yellow crime scene tape everywhere. Sam snagged a pita chip and motioned towards Maggie. "So tell us, what did you find out?" Maggie cleared her throat. "Well, we talked to Joan Dudley, down at the post office. That's kind of the information hub out here, if you know what I mean." Joan was something over 70 and had been postmistress for 50 years. She heard every single word that was spoken in the post office, even if it wasn't spoken to her. We often joked that if she could, she'd have tables and chairs in the lobby so that people could sit down and gossip longer. As it was, she pretty much knew everything that was going on in town. Lacey came in every morning at the same time, Maggie went on. I guess right after she came up from the bus stop. Joni said that she was always polite, never chatted, and didn't get a lot of junk mail. She also said that Doug brought the boys in every Saturday, and that he was much friendlier, but still not much for idle chit-chat. She leaned confidentially toward Sam. Joni lives for idle chit-chat. Sam nodded encouragingly. I see. Anyway, Joni noticed that Lacey had a postcard from the library, the ones they send to tell you a book that you've reserved to come in. So she thought that's where Lacey went next. So we went there as well. Sam drank some wine. And Viv took over. Carol said that yes, Lacey was there Friday morning, and she did pick up a book. But then something weird happened. Kate Fisher and Lynn Fahey were talking about something, probably the damn garden club, and Carol said that Lacey just kind of froze and listened. Kate has a big mouth, just so you know. Not only does she talk a lot, but she's loud. Whatever Lacey heard, Carol said she turned white and practically ran out of the library. Sam's eyes narrowed. Really? And Carol, this is Carol Anderson, yes? Didn't remember what the conversation was about? Maggie and Viv both shook their heads. We were going to Carol's tonight and ask her, Viv said. But she's got a hot date as well. Sam groaned, and I gulped my entire glass of wine. Viv stood up. Well, hate to leave, but we'll take our bottle here and go tell Shelley what we've learned. Maybe we can all talk to Carol tomorrow, Ellie? I stood up, and so did Sam. Great idea, I said. It was a real pleasure talking to you, ladies, Sam said, bowing graciously. Maggie giggled as she and Viv walked off into the evening. Sam and I settled back down. My solar lights went on. My front porch wasn't as neat and chic as the Mitchell's porch. My furniture was older and a bit creaky, but I had painted it all last year, and the cushions had been dusted off. It was cozy and comfortable, and with a view of the lake, it was one of my favorite places on earth. This must be a good life for you, Sam said softly. I can smell your spaghetti sauce from here. Good food, a beautiful lake, and friends who come by with wine. Yes, I said, I'm very lucky. This is a good place to live. I'll put on the pasta. I'll be right back. Inside the house, I turned up the water for the pasta, lit a few candles, and turned on some music. Tessa made a face at me from her reading chair in the living room, and I stuck my tongue out at her as I went by. Boot followed me back onto the porch. She growled softly at Sam, who patted her on the head and behind her ears, making them friends for life. She hopped up on a chair and sat back, ready to join the conversation. I suppose it's terribly unprofessional to talk about an active case, I asked. Sam nodded. It is indeed, but Lawrence isn't too strict about things. The preliminary autopsy showed that Doug Mitchell may have been injected with something prior to his death by asphyxiation. There were no signs of struggle or any other trauma, which indicates he sat there quietly in the car until he passed out. We have to wait for toxicology reports before we can determine what, if anything, was in his system. That will determine whether he did, in fact, kill himself, or if he was drugged and murdered. When will you know for sure? Hopefully by tomorrow. In the meantime, we're looking for Lacey. She's a suspect? He shifted in his seat. When a person is murdered, the spouse always gets looked at very closely. I nodded. A few cars had gone by, and the clubhouse on the lake suddenly lit up. What's going on there? Sam asked. That's the lake clubhouse. Every Mother's Day, the Historical Society holds a brunch, a fundraiser for Founders Day weekend. They're over there now, starting to get ready. That sounds nice. It is. I take my mom every year. The food is good, It's lots of fun for my girls, and you can't be eating out by the lake on a beautiful spring morning. I stood up. Ready for dinner? We went inside. Tessa was solemn and polite. Dinner was delicious. Sam and I finished the second bottle of wine, and inside the bakery box were perfect little butter cookies that melted in your mouth. And after months of sugar deprivation, it may have been the best tasting cookies ever. I made espresso, and Sam and I sat in the dining room table, talking and laughing, and when he left, he gave me a goodnight kiss that did more than just send electricity to my toes. It sent all sorts of other feelings to all sorts of other parts of my body. This was a man who really knew his way around a woman, and I was pretty sure I wanted him to get to know mine a whole lot better, and the sooner the better. It wasn't until I was going to bed that I saw the text from Mark, asking about Sunday with a little heart emoji right there on the end.